June 1944. Somewhere on a narrow rural road in occupied France, a German supply convoy pushes through the darkness. Headlights are turned low, shields fitted to reduce glare and avoid Allied aircraft circling above. The lead truck rolls forward at a steady pace until, without warning, the front tire detonates with a sharp crack. Seconds later, another truck shudders and slews sideways, then another. Within moments, the entire convoy grinds to a halt, engines idling uselessly as air hisses from torn rubber. When the drivers climb down to investigate, they find the road littered with small metal objects, twisted and brutal in their simplicity. Each piece has 4 sharpened spikes arranged so that no matter how it lands, one point always faces upward. It is not a bomb. It is not a mine. It is something far older. This was medieval technology repurposed for modern war, and in the summer of 1944, it was quietly crippling German logistics across occupied France. The device was called a caltrop. British engineers working for the Special Operations Executive had taken a weapon design older than gunpowder and turned it into a mass-produced instrument of sabotage. Each one cost almost nothing to manufacture. Thousands could be packed into a single parachute container. According to French regional archives, resistance fighters scattered them across the major road networks of northern and central France. German reports from the period describe the sabotage campaign as a spreading disease. SOE had a different name for it, Plan Tortue, because its purpose was not to destroy the enemy outright, but to slow him to a crawl. Germany's fundamental problem in occupied France was distance. When Allied forces landed in Normandy, German reinforcements were scattered across the country, many hundreds of kilometers from the beaches. Armored divisions, infantry formations, fuel, ammunition, and supplies all had to move quickly by road and rail to reach the front. The Wehrmacht relied heavily on truck convoys to bridge these distances. Every stretch of French roadway became a potential weakness. The French resistance understood this. SOE understood it as well. The challenge was how to exploit that vulnerability using limited resources and civilians with little or no technical training. Traditional sabotage methods had obvious limitations. Blowing rail lines required explosives, detonators, and precise timing. Bridges were heavily guarded and could be repaired surprisingly quickly. Tracks cut during the night were often operational again by morning. Explosives also left clear forensic evidence and invited brutal reprisals. SOE needed something different, something that could be deployed by a farmer, a shopkeeper, or a teenage courier with no instruction beyond scatter and leave. Something that could be placed in seconds and removed just as quickly if a German patrol appeared. The answer did not come from a laboratory, it came from military history. Roman legions had scattered caltrops to break cavalry charges. Medieval armies used them to slow infantry advances. The principle was brutally simple: deny mobility without direct confrontation. British engineers realized that pneumatic tires were far more vulnerable than horses' hooves or boot soles. At Station 9, SOE's primary research and development center located at the Fryth Estate near Welwyn Garden City, engineers began refining the ancient design for modern use. Officially designated on July 19, 1940, Station 9 was commanded by Lieutenant Colonel John Dolphin, with Professor D.M. Newitt overseeing scientific development. Their task was to design weapons that were light enough for parachute drops, robust enough to survive impact, simple enough for untrained operatives, and impossible to trace back to Britain. The caltrop met every requirement. According to records later held by the Imperial War Museum, the standard SOE caltrop measured roughly 59 by 59 by 51 millimeters. Made of solid metal, its tetrahedral shape ensured that one spike always pointed upward, regardless of how it landed. There were no moving parts, no markings, and no maintenance requirements. Drop them on a road and let gravity do the rest. The Americans independently reached the same conclusion. The Office of Strategic Services developed its own version, slightly larger at 8.6 centimeters per side, with hollow spikes designed to allow air to escape even if the tip became clogged with mud or debris. OSS Research Chief Stanley Lovell later described it as the simplest weapon we ever made. Caltrops were only part of a broader tire sabotage program. SOE also developed more discrete tools for individual operatives. One was the coin-type tire slasher, now preserved in the Imperial War Museum collection. Roughly the size of a large coin, it concealed a short curved blade that could be deployed with a flick of a lever. Carried in a pocket, it could pass casual inspection and was intended for use in parking areas or roadside stops. One such device was issued to Wing Commander Forrest Frederick Edward Yo Thomas, known to the Germans as the White Rabbit, before his missions into occupied France. Another design, the jagged dagger clasp knife, incorporated a claw-shaped tire slasher at the pommel. Closed, it appeared to be an ordinary knife. Open, it could silently destroy a vehicle's mobility in seconds. All of these devices were manufactured sterile, carrying no identifying marks that could be traced back to their origin. Production and distribution were handled by Station 12 at Aston House near Stevenage, under the command of Colonel Leslie J. Cardozo Wood. The facility became legendary within SOE. One historian later described its commander as a strong contender for the original inspiration behind Q in the James Bond novels. By late 1942, 2 or 3 lorries left Aston House every day, carrying sabotage equipment destined for occupied Europe. Records show millions of detonators and tens of thousands of mines produced there. Exact caltrip figures were never recorded or were later destroyed, but the design was so simple that it could be stamped out by any competent metalworking shop. Getting the weapons into France was an operation in itself. Supplies reached resistance networks primarily through parachute drops, using standardized CLE canisters. The Mark I container measured roughly 1.7 meters long and 40 centimeters in diameter, with a carrying capacity of around 159 kilograms. RAF Tempsford served as the primary departure airfield. Halifax bombers could carry up to 15 containers per sortie, while Sterling aircraft managed 20. By the time of the Normandy invasion, some 10,000 tons of equipment had been delivered to France, 4,000 tons before D-Day and another 6,000 afterward. 50 active wireless links connected London to resistance groups across the country, forming the nervous system of the sabotage campaign. Plan Tortue was activated on the night of the 5th to the 6th of June 1944, triggered by coded personal messages broadcast by the BBC. Among them was the innocuous-sounding phrase, "Il fait chaud à Suez." Across France, resistance cells went into action. Regional archives from departments such as the Aisne record that tire puncture devices were spread across main roads in large numbers. Fighters sewed special nails into the road surface and scattered caltrops at key junctions. In Sector 146 near Saint-Quentin, resistance reports describe systematic road sabotage combined with the removal of signposts to further disorient German convoys. What followed was not a single dramatic event, but a steady accumulation of delay. The most frequently cited example of transport sabotage affecting German operations in France was the delayed movement of the 2nd SS Panzer Division, Der Reich. Stationed near Montauban in southern France when the invasion began, the division should, on paper, have reached Normandy within 3 days. Instead, its journey dragged on for more than 2 weeks. Roads were blocked, vehicles broke down, fuel failed to arrive on schedule, and commanders struggled to move entire formations intact. In its own after-action assessments, SOE later concluded that the additional fortnight imposed on what should have been a 3-day journey may have been of decisive importance in securing the Normandy bridgehead during its most vulnerable phase. Historical accuracy, however, requires restraint. Caltrops alone did not cause the delay. Railway sabotage played a larger role, particularly operations such as Tony Brooks' Pimento Circuit, which disabled rolling stock by draining axle oil and replacing it with abrasive powder supplied by SOE. Trees were felled across roads, bridges were temporarily blocked, ambushes by Maquis units forced detours, and Royal Air Force strikes targeted fuel trains using intelligence passed by SAS teams operating behind the lines. Even the Imperial War Museum catalog notes that coin-type tire slashers were of doubtful effectiveness against thick-walled military tires. Caltrops worked best against civilian vehicles pressed into military service, staff cars, requisition trucks, and lightly built transports rather than purpose-designed army lorries. German countermeasures escalated quickly. Convoys were assigned heavier escorts, routes were inspected in advance, and civilians were punished collectively for acts of resistance. The response was often indiscriminate. General Otto von Stülpnagel declared that no mercy would be shown to saboteurs and that all captured participants would be shot. The passage of Das Reich through the Limousin region, nicknamed Little Russia by German troops because of resistance activity, resulted in some of the war's most infamous atrocities. On June 9, 1944, 99 civilians were hanged in Toul. The following day at Oradour-sur-Glane, 642 men, women, and children were murdered. Sabotage imposed military friction, but the human cost was severe. Senior German commanders acknowledged the scale of the problem. Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel admitted that acts of sabotage had become horrifyingly frequent in France and Belgium. From the Allied side, Eisenhower's Supreme Headquarters credited resistance operations with imposing serious delays on virtually every German division attempting to reach Normandy. The value of these actions was not measured in tires punctured or trucks disabled, but in accumulated disruption. Military planners call this friction, the countless small failures that slow an army's response, fracture coordination, and force commanders to act with incomplete forces at critical moments. In that context, the caltrop embodied something central to British unconventional warfare. While Germany invested enormous resources in tanks, rockets, and prestige weapons, Britain invested in cheap, easily manufactured tools designed for mass distribution. A single supply canister could contain enough caltrops to close a road for hours. Dozens of canisters could cripple an entire region's transport network. The cost exchange ratio was overwhelming. As MRD Foote, SOE's official historian, later observed, the organization revived medieval devices like the caltrop because they solved modern problems efficiently. British engineers did not invent the caltrop. What they did was more characteristic of British military innovation. They recognized an old solution to a new problem, refined it just enough, manufactured it cheaply, and placed it in the hands of ordinary people. It required no training, left no trace, and cost almost nothing. Scattered across the roads of occupied France in the summer of 1944, it did not win the war by itself, but it slowed an army at the moment when time mattered most, and sometimes that is enough.